when you can really do Tonglen, it's no longer a practice. Then it becomes what you do, and it is of service to the world. So the culmination of a lifetime of practice for Cherise is the capacity to really sink to levels of awareness that other people might not in themselves actually even understand.
Or even be aware of.
Or even be aware of. Because we've all learned to just cover over our suffering. We've defended against our pain. We've learned 1,000 ways to not know that we feel shame, or we feel afraid, or we feel hurt. So adults that come into therapy very often are not very aware, and it takes many years of psychoanalysis and hard work to help people become aware. What we found with this process is that because Cherise is so aware of another person's suffering through her practice of Tonglen her entire life, that she can very quickly access what they're feeling, what their pain is, what their unawareness is, and help them get aware of it within themselves by her awareness of what it is within them.
I think it's important to understand how this came to be. And I've had very significant suffering in my life, and by some grace, which I don't really understand, I was able to, as traumatic events were happening, I was sinking, I was going in deeper within myself. The vast majority of trauma situations, people will leave their body. They will find ways to dissociate from what's happening. But what I was doing was going in, and as the trauma continued, I continually went deeper and deeper and deeper. And so when Lyndall's saying that it was a lifetime of practice, it was a lifetime of practice that has now developed into this capacity.
So while this is a deeply sacred and spiritual process, it's also very practical. And the way it practically looks is that we of course find out everything from the client that is relevant about their history, just as you would in normal therapy. We do the usual intake process. When the client meets with us, we explain to them what it's practically going to look like.
Then I would go into an explanation of what will be happening.
Because for Cherise to do the work means it's a very active process. It's not just a meditative, quiet process. Because when we're really embracing the suffering of another being, that is in your body, with tears and anger and sweat and tears and all of that. And whatever trauma is happening will be in her body. So we discovered it just doesn't work for her to sit in a chair. No.
Chairs don't work.
As it evolved we had her lie down so she could just meditatively go very, very deep and not worry about whatever bodily responses she would be feeling as she takes on another person's suffering.
Right.
So it's kind of evolved as we've gone along. The client sits on one side of that, it's like a massage table. Client sits on one side and I sit on the other side. So Cherise lies down. The client often thinks they're the one who has to lie down and they get a little worried about it. But no, she lies down, goes into a very deep meditative state where she can feel their unaware suffering. And I just facilitate that conversation that the client is going to have with their own unaware suffering. And that can be a little strange in the beginning, but it usually takes about 3 or 4 minutes and they are completely in relationship with themselves. They've completely forgotten that Cherise is even there because it's them that is there. So then a conversation can start with them with their own unawareness. And then things just start unfolding very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. At this level, everybody's an individual. So you would be an individual, I'm an individual, Lyndall's an individual. And underneath that is a very subtle connection that we are usually aware of. And what happens for me is that when I begin to sink, I sink to a level at which all that makes us individual falls away. And in all spiritual practices, there is a belief that we all come from one. And so what's happening is I'm going to this level at which we are at the one. So when that happens, I'm able to access suffering within your soul and feel it in my soul. Because if we are one, my soul is your soul is my soul. It's one. And I get that this sounds completely not believable. I say it all the time that this is what has happened here is completely unbelievable and absolutely true. And I cannot explain it. There really aren't words to explain it, but that's what happens. And so then when we get to that point, I can access suffering. Most often it's suffering that that client is not even aware of. But they've had this uneasiness. Really often when people come to work with us, they will say things like, I don't know, I've done lots of therapy, something's just not right, but they don't know what it is. And we are getting to that unaware.
And it very much is a partnership with the client. It's very important that it's a partnership, and also that there is no voodoo going on here. Their soul is showing this. We can't get anything from people that they don't want us to know about.
Right. One of the things that's been really nice is that we've heard back from a lot of clients about what the process was like for them, and that initially it feels very odd to have this person that is laying on a table, and they're like, ugh, what's going on here? And it only takes a few minutes before, when that soul connection happens, that they're aware that this really is me, and that they almost forget that it is me. For that client, I think it's an incredibly emotional experience, very, very emotional. It really does just stir up everything that is unresolved and gives it the air and the light to then begin the process for this is what I need to look at next. This is next in my process.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, because I'm sitting watching the client and working with the client, they forget that Charisse is there. They are really having a conversation with their own unaware soul part of themselves. And it's probably the most touching, profoundly touching work I have ever done. It feels holy as I watch people learning to relate to themselves in a loving way. It truly is a moving experience. And I know for them, it is a very, very moving experience. Most people leave feeling like they've been profoundly changed